actually get started and introduce you and then start going over some of the questions and topics. But Jane, in the meantime, if there are any other questions where you're doing that at all, just shoot me an email or we can talk about it more if the assignment still doesn't make complete sense.
Okay, can do. Thank you.
All right. Okay, and just because we are on a time crunch and I'm so excited to have today's guest speaker in, we are going to start, and I will let in the other students as log in. The first time I ever saw Lisa Guerrero or knew of her was she was a host on a show called Best Damn Sports Show. And a friend of mine I actually went to school with, also Chris Rose, was somebody that was involved in that show. And it was very exciting to see him make it big and also to be introduced to Lisa in an official manner on TV. Never had the thought or chance of thinking I'd reach out to her and one day talk to her, but thanks to social media and politics, we've interacted and it has been an amazing thing. But Lisa Guerrero today and for the last 10 plus years, I believe, has been an investigative reporter for Inside Edition, and she spends her time finding issues that need to be addressed, determining how best to address them, and interacting with people, good and bad, to find out how to get that story to the public so we understand what is happening and where we need to protect ourselves. And it involves so much work dealing with people, listening to people, confrontation, and so many other issues that we're going to hit on today. It's incredible. But not only does Lisa work with a famous national news organization, she also spends a lot of time donating her time to worthy charities like Salvation Army, and she gives is more so than a lot of people I know, is, like I said, politically motivated and politically involved in what's happening in our country, which painfully takes a lot of listening to do. And the newest, I think, endeavor with Lisa is her Be Brave speech. It's something through another person we share in common that I got the chance to listen to on video and is so inspirational. So I want to bring Lisa in, and we're going to talk a little bit about what listening does and how important it is in the process. And if to start off with, Lisa, thank you so much for coming in. And did I miss any big things in your biography that you'd like to share with everyone?
First of all, thank you, Brent, so much for inviting me to talk to you guys. It is a real honor. And as somebody who myself came from a community college, Golden West College in California, I really appreciate the hard work that you guys are doing and the goals that you want to achieve, because believe me, they are achievable and they are possible. Anything is possible. And Brett, I think you pretty much summed up the bullet points of my background. And one of the things, because we're going to be talking about listening, one of the other things I wanted to add was that I started as a model turned actor. And as an actress on a soap opera, especially, listening was incredibly important because they do a close-up, what we used to call extreme close-ups, when you listen to the other character and you react, or you listen and you take in what they're doing and you can kind of see the wheels turning in your head. So actors, actually, believe it or not, they're not just learning how to speak, or they're not just focused on memorizing their dialogue in the script. They're also thinking about how they're listening, active listening, which we'll talk about in a minute. But acting is part of my background, and then journalism, first as a sportscaster, then as a breaking news reporter for Inside Edition, West Coast correspondent, And then finally, as the chief investigative correspondent for Inside Edition, which basically means I chase bad guys for a living and confront them and try to get answers from them. I do everything from consumer reports, which are lighter consumer investigations where we do tests and a lot of lab work. And we do cold cases, we do crime. So I kind of cover a variety of journalism under the umbrella of investigative journalism now. And as Brett mentioned, I have been doing keynote speeches in the last couple of years called Being Brave, which encourages people to find their inner badass superhero and to really tap into that bravery and courage that we all have, even if you don't think you have it. I know you have it. So that's my keynote. And I also am an artist. So my creative outlet is mosaic art. And Brett has a couple pieces I see behind him. But I feel very strongly that everybody needs to have an artistic or musical outlet along with their career or their school, that there needs to be some kind of creative inspiration that helps drive you. So that's my background in a nutshell. So go ahead and we can discuss whatever you guys have on your minds.
Well, I mean, you made me think of something even that I didn't even think about when we put this together. The idea of being an actress and how many times you watch people respond non-verbally during movies or TV shows. And that's, I mean, the ones that do it well, I mean, you feel like they're really feeling it. And that's a skill. And that's something we all strive to do, I think. And when we're listening to others in a face-to-face world, when we stop doing it all on computer screens. And that's
Well, one thing that I remember about being an actor is that, although there are words that you're memorizing, that you're delivering, the very best actors are delivering those lines because they've put themselves in somebody else's shoes, right? If you're portraying a character, then you're actually becoming somebody that you are not. And so empathy is a big part of why a really good actor is a good actor, is they're able to identify and empathize with somebody else's condition, human condition that's not your own. A very good listener in business has those same kinds of skill sets. In order to communicate in anything, whether it's business, entertainment, media, acting, in order to communicate, you have to first put yourself in the other person's position. What do they need out of this conversation? What is the goal that they're trying to achieve? And empathy and trying to put yourself in the other person's position before you start talking will help you be a better listener, because you're listening not just for what you're getting out of it, but what the other person is getting out of it. Do you see what I'm saying? And actors do that.
Yeah, no, that's a huge thing. And in your job today, I mean, obviously, I know you spend a lot of time researching yourself and deciding stories to go and investigate and stories to put on air, but you probably also have to listen to what's in the community, what's in the producers' minds. So how does listening help you find stories and get started on that path of who you're going to report on, what you're going to try and get out of that?
So listening is the very first skill set a reporter needs when you're putting together an investigative story, for example, which is what I do. So the first step is listening to the needs of somebody else. I am constantly asking on social media, do you have tips for an investigation? Reach out to me here. On Inside Edition, we have a tip line, and we're actively going through that tip line and listening for voicemails, listening to people that have ideas, listening to voices in the community that are expressing concern about, this subject or this person. And so listening is the very first and most, I think, important part of being a good reporter. Because what's the point of you being there? A reporter is reporting on something, a situation, an issue, some element in the community, a person. But before you speak and before you can convey whatever those concerns are, you have to at first listen to what the problem is, that issue, and then let that wash over you. How would I feel if my dad was in a nursing home and somebody was abusing the seniors at that nursing home. How would I feel if that were me? So you listen to the concern and you let that wash over you. And then the next step is empathizing with that concern. So before you even get a microphone in, people think, okay, somebody hands me a microphone, I chase bad guys and I scream at them. Obviously, that's not what I do. What I do is I first listen to a concern in the community or a crime or a cold case, or somebody's reached out to me, which is very often I get my tips through somebody direct messaging me on Facebook or Twitter saying, my sister has gone through this, or my niece, is a missing person and nobody's paying attention to her in our community. Can you look into this? One of my biggest stories I ever did, Justice for Juliet, came about because a woman, Monica Hall, contacted me on Facebook, and she had this incredible story to tell about her niece, Juliet, who was killed in her crib. And it had happened 4 years prior, and it was now a cold case, and the local authorities were bungling it, and all three of the suspects were allowed to go to different states. But the very first step, in what became an award-winning series of investigations where we finally caught the killer, and he's now serving 80 years to life in prison, which wouldn't have happened without our investigation. But the very first step was me listening to Monica Hall tell me the story about her niece, Juliet Gertz. So, it's things like that make the best reporters, those award-winning reporters that you see and the people that you want to emulate if you're going into journalism. The first step is listening and empathizing to a person and their problem.
That's so true. And it's a year ago, I had a local reporter participate in this, and it was interesting. One of the students, she had said something similar about putting out requests for information. The student said, isn't that just because you're too lazy to find your own story? And it was amazing that was a perception versus what you're sharing today. And she didn't say it as eloquently, but that finding the stories through active listening and through reaching out to the community provides that power you have to transform it into something more relevant or more top of mind than other people may be able to do, which is neat.
Exactly. And it also, on a slightly different note, it gives you access to the story that you wouldn't have if somebody didn't communicate with you directly.
Right.
Monica Hall went to me to investigate this incredible story and help her solve it. And because she reached out to me, I had access, of course, now to the family and to the witnesses. So, so there's two reasons. Number one, you put a call out there, call to action. Can you please give me some tips? We want to get good story ideas that maybe we haven't heard of or we haven't read, but also people have an inside bit of information. They could be a whistleblower for a company, and they're willing to reach out to me either on background, or they want to come forward and tell their story. So again, this all starts with listening to the subject and listening to a potential problem, and how are we going to solve it?
And have there been instances where you've listened to the first person who brings you the story and you kind of map out where you think or you believe this story may transpire to, and do your research for that, and then start actually speaking to some more of the people, and all of a sudden you realize instead of going this far right, you're actually going this far left with the story? And how does adapting after you hear things work within your industry? Do you stick to where you want it to be, or do you listen and kind of rework it?
Yes. So here's what a good reporter will do. You start with a premise of a story because somebody's given you a tip, or you've seen wrongdoing, or you see there's a problem that you want to report on. So you gather as much information as you can, and you start to record or report your story. You start to write it, you start to record it. What often happens, I would say 50% of the time, is that there's a nugget of information somebody drops into a conversation that you catch, and you think, oh my goodness, this is not about that. This is about something completely different. And so you have to be able to pivot and say to yourself, because I gathered this new information, this investigation is really not about the thing I thought it was. It's now bigger or it's different. So we have to be able to pivot. And I work with my producers and we'll say, hey, remember when that guy said this in the interview? Let's research this because this could be a bigger bombshell than we thought it was. Or the person we were looking into is not maybe the real person of interest because our witness just told us something completely different. So if you're a really good listener, you're listening to the clues that people give you when you're an investigative reporter, and sometimes that changes the entire premise of your investigation. That happened. I'll give you an example. One of the first, and if you guys Google these stories, which I would suggest that, once we finish talking, Google Justice for Juliet, which is the last series of stories that I told you. Here's the next one. We did a story about air duct. It was an air conditioning duct investigation. We did this 10 years ago, a long time ago. We thought it was a consumer report where somebody would say, hey, for $50, we'll come and clean your air ducts. And then all of a sudden, oh my goodness, they find mold. And so what you think is going to be a $50 treatment for your house turns into a $2,000 disaster because they allegedly found mold. Well, we got a tip that one of these companies was doing a bait and switch. So they said, we'll come for $50, we'll clean the the air duct. And every single time they come, they find mold. In fact, they taught their technicians a series of tricks and vocabulary to use to dupe the consumer into thinking they had mold. Well, okay, this is the story we thought we were doing. So I pose as the homeowner undercover. We rent a house. The people came to the house, and of course, they discovered mold, even though we had an expert with us in a back room that had already checked the entire house, no mold. So of course, this company comes, they find mold. And we thought, okay, this is it. This is the story. We're gonna out this company, and we're gonna show to consumers you have to be careful about these bait and switches. What we ended up finding out was that this company, I told you that their technicians were taught to do this bait and switch. We found out because we sent an undercover producer to be a technician. We found out that the owner was colluding with a criminal who wasn't allowed to even do business. He was a sex offender. He wasn't supposed to do business in that state. And he was the secret partner of this air conditioning duct company. So we followed him to Florida and we confronted him. And it became this crazy story. He threatens me on camera. He rides up in his motorcycle, says he's going to kill me. It was the craziest investigation. And we caught him on camera lying. And we won a National Headliner Award that year, first place. That was one of my first big stories. But again, that story started as we thought it was going to be a simple consumer report, and it turns into a much bigger story because we were listening. And we discovered more information that made this a bigger and better story. So I hope that kind of answers your question. So that was the air duct investigation. We've done a couple, but that was the first one. So I would say that was about in 2010 or 2011. If you look for that, it's a crazy investigation. It was really good.
Yeah, I'll link the videos onto, because we're going to share this video with the students. So I'll link those links too. But it's interesting because at the very beginning of your answer, you said about 50% of reporters do that. And there seems to be that 50% of not just reporters, but people you deal with that finish talking and they start thinking about, what am I going to say next? And I can just, it's frustrating because when you're talking to those people, but it's just, when you're going in an interview, and if you're interviewing someone that's either not really listening to you, or you just don't feel that connection is happening where it's flowing, how do you deal with that? Because sometimes there's that, just like, they've got their canned answers and they're not, especially if it's a business, how do you get beyond what they're scripted to say for them to really listen what you're asking and answer your questions?
So that's a great question. Often you get talking points. Reporters, you see this if you watch MSNBC or any political commentary, political shows. You see a politician going on television and he has his talking points and he always gets back to that. And it doesn't really matter what the reporter's asking him. He goes back to his canned answers. Great politicians are really good at that, by the way, and so are really good business people. They always continue to go back. And that's a real skill set on the other side of the camera. The challenge for a really good reporter is to be able to get them to reveal something they weren't expecting to reveal. And the best way to do that is to carefully listen to those canned answers. And of course, before you talk to this person, you will have done massive research, right? You don't just go into any kind of interview with anybody from a business setting or as a journalist. I would never go to a meeting without doing research on my subject. And I'm one of those over researchers. I do a ton of ancillary work before I ever get on camera. My producers kind of laugh at me about this sometimes. I had a sports producer, Benji. He would give me links to different athletes that we're going to talk to and background. And boy, I would read that, and then I would go do all this other research and I would come with like a binder full of stuff to talk to. I've got a 5-minute interview. There's no way I could get to all this stuff. But my point is, at some point, you will have absorbed some interesting tidbit that he is going to, or she is going to allude to in their canned answer. And that's when you can come in and you can say, you know what, that's really interesting that you say that. You've been saying that for 3 years, but last year, didn't you get into this? Didn't you have this stumbling block? If you do your research, you're able to push them off that game where you get them to answer honestly. And that's what you want, right? What your goal is in any situation, whether it's interpersonal relationship, business, as a journalist, you want the other person to reveal truth, right? You want them to be honest. So when you're dealing with somebody that has canned answers, you've got to push them off. You've got to somehow get them to stumble. I'll give you another example of this that you can look at is my investigation with a very famous TV televangelist named Kenneth Copeland. And this is a story that went viral. And the full interview, which is the uncut interview, and I think it's maybe 8 or 9 minutes long, that went viral worldwide. Over 1 billion people saw it. And it's not because I was doing anything, that was extraordinary. I got him to reveal himself, and I got him to reveal his truth. Now, he's a televangelist and very polished, and he never does mainstream interviews. We did an unscheduled interview where we found him outside of one of his seminars and ran up to him and started asking him questions while the tape was rolling. Some people call it an ambush. I call it good investigative journalism. And we caught him off guard. So he wasn't prepared with his canned answers to some of our very honest questions about things he had said. And although I kept going back to the same questions, kept asking him the same types of questions, he was thrown off his game. He wasn't expecting me to see him at that moment. But when he gathered himself, he revealed himself. He kept trying to go back to his canned answers, but I had done so much research that I would throw out little nuggets that he didn't expect me to know. And the extraordinary thing about that interview was that he showed himself to be who he is, which in my opinion is a snake oil salesman and taking advantage of desperate people. So those, you can overcome people that are professional grifters. You can overcome people that are professional spokespersons, spokespeople. You can chip away at that very professional facade that a lot of people have to get to the heart of the truth. But the best way to do that is by doing massive research. And again, when you go back and look at the Kenneth Copeland interview, you can see that if I hadn't done research and I was just there to ask him my 1 or 2 questions, I would have given up and gone away after his first or second response. Yeah. But I was prepared. I knew that he had spent millions of dollars on a plane that was sold to him by Tyler Perry. I threw that nugget out and he was shocked that I knew that. He threw some stuff out about me, about, living this life of luxury. And, I said, he quoted scripture at me. I quoted scripture at him back. I was prepared for what he was going to say because I've heard him say that before on camera. So I prepared, I went through and found scripture that that I was able to use after he threw that I knew I was ready for what he was going to say, and he was not ready for me throwing scripture back at him. He was not expecting me to reveal that both my grandfathers were ministers, and they would have been rolling over in their graves had they known that somebody like him was professing to be a minister. So at any rate, he was not expecting what I had to say, so he revealed himself.
And that preparation is huge. And it transfers. I mean, you think and listen to you and say, okay, that's a reporter's job, and that's a tied to this. But I mean, you could parlay this to going into a job interview, feeling comfortable with the company you're going to apply for, researching that company, and the listening skills in an interview are so important when you're talking about, do I want to work for this company? Because it is a two-way interview. And do you have any like tips you would say, this is a way to listen better? I mean, we all read books and say, be active, look, nod, smile, but is there anything you've learned over the years that say, this helps me listen, helps me remember, and some tricks you might have to?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked that. And one of the questions that I do get from students a lot is, the job interview. Tell me how to, what can I do to prepare for a really important job interview? I really want this job. So the first thing I always say is, do you want that job? Why do you want that job? What about that job appeals to you? What about this company makes you want to work for that company? So you need to first look at yourself and ask yourself some very tough questions about what your goals are and write them down. Bullet points. This is why I want to work here. This is why I want to work for this person. This is what I hope to achieve. This is what I want to get out of it. This company appeals to me because of this, 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 this. Start to really put together a file on this business or company or person that you think you want to work for. And then at the end of that research, if you say, yes, okay, I've done my research, this is why I want to work for them. Guess what? You just prepared yourself for the job interview, because the job interview is not them interviewing you for a job. It's also you determining whether or not you want to work there. So it's a conversation, not just an interview, right? So go in with specific ideas of things you want to talk to that person about. If something appeals to you about, the social justice aspect of this company, then ask them specific questions about that. That is going to impress the heck out of them if they know that you've done your research about, what their company's core values are when it comes to, female empowerment or social justice or, giving back to the community. Whatever that is and whatever is important to you, know those things first about the company. Don't just take the first job and think that they're doing you a favor. Value yourself enough to know that you are going to help that business be a better business by your participation. Do you see what I'm saying? And then that helps you be a better, because then you're not coming in nervous and scared and hoping they give you a job. All of a sudden you put yourself into a position of being a really good listener with good communication skills. This thing at the phone, do not take this in with you. Don't take your phone in with you. If you have a purse or handbag, pocketbook, if you're from the East Coast, don't take it in with you. Leave it out. Come in looking professional, armed with your research, maybe a notebook if you want to take notes, and that's it. And you sit down, introduce yourself, look the person in the eye, and listen to everything they're saying to you, because they may give you some information that is going to strategically change the entire outlook of what you're about to say, or even if you even want that job, or if you want it more. And then you can say to yourself, oh, wait a minute, he just dropped a nugget about this part of that job. And my background over here from when I was a junior in high school is going to impress him that I know that because I interned at this over here when I was 17. But you can only do that if you're really listening, and you can only listen if you're not nervous, because a lot of people come equipped with their questions and are scared to look off the paper because they're scared. The best way to be brave, which is what I talk about all the time, is to come as prepared as you can be with the knowledge about that business and that person, and the fact that you are of value, and they're not just interviewing you, you're also interviewing them.
And there's so much nonverbal things that go into a job interview, and I kind of sit on this for just a little bit because I'm not sure if it was this class or my other classes. I explained the best job interview I had was I was interviewing with a lawyer, and he had a picture of a Notre Dame quarterback that ended up being his roommate in college. And going to Notre Dame, he disliked Michigan immensely. My whole family are Ohio State fans. So we started talking about how much we both disliked the University of Michigan and talked about that for about 25 minutes. And the rest of it went so smoothly because it's not that I listened to words, but I absorbed his surrounding. And that's part of listening as far as I look at it. You listen with your eyes too, and you see what's there and how you can relate to somebody.
Yeah, that is a great tip, because you're going to go into their environment usually for a job interview, and it is important to take a look around and to see the person is going to have some things in their office that is important to them. Here's my office. I've got all these awards that I've won. I've got some films that I've worked on, some TV shows that I've worked on. If most people that are in that environment are going to have important clues around them that you can help to build some commonality and can do some groundbreaking for you. Oh my gosh, I didn't know you were involved with that organization. My dad's the president of that Rotary Club, or my mom is a doctor at that hospital that you have some certificate on over there. So if you look carefully, and again, don't come prepared with a script. Bullet points are good, not a script, but you can get a lot of value out of listening. And as Brent said, listening with your eyes. Take a look around and see what that person values, and what that person's got in their office that can help break the ice. I think that's a really good tip.
And you say do research, bring bullet points, and do all that. I'm sure you get a lot of people that reach out to you and say, can you help me? Can you get me a job here, an internship here, different things like that? And they do their research, but are you able to feel and sense the difference between the genuine person that tries to connect to you and the person who's just done their research and said, okay, I'll say this because I think it's what you want to hear?
Yeah. So, through my career, I've had people that have reached out to want to be an assistant or want to intern with me. And, it's really interesting because I always ask them a really simple question. Why do you want to do this? Why would you want to get into journalism, or specifically investigative journalism? Or why would you want to work, with me or with Inside Edition? Or, what is your goal? When you look at the landscape of what you think your life is going to look like, how is working here going to be of value to you? So I always ask first, why are you coming here? What are you trying to get out of it? And I don't want to be hyperbolic when I say this, but it's shocking to me how many people either don't have an answer to that or have the wackiest answer you can possibly imagine. For example, a young woman a couple of years ago wanted to intern with our unit. And I'm not the person that hires, by the way, it's Inside Edition that hires. So, but she went through me for part of the, I guess it's kind of an interview process. So I met her and I said, okay, she's like, oh, I want to do what you do. I want to be an investigative journalist. I want to do what you do. And I said, why? And she said, I want to be on TV. I tried to be a model, and by the way, not knocking modeling. I was a model and actor. She goes, I was a model, and then, my cousin is a casting director in LA, and I tried to be an actor, and I wasn't really good at that, but I want to be on camera. I just want to be on camera. I want to do what you do, and you look so glamorous, and you wear such cute clothes. And by the way, she was quite honest. It was an honest answer, but it wasn't the right answer. Obviously, you don't want people to very much, I risk my life in a lot of these stories that I do. I'm not doing it to look cute on camera. I'm doing it because I want to tell stories and help our viewers overcome challenges, or be able to be educated about this or that. But holy moly, I was very surprised that was her goal, was because she wanted to be cute and be on camera, and she just was going to be on camera no matter what. And of course, we didn't end up hiring her. But be really thoughtful about your response when somebody asks you, why do you want to intern? Why do you want a job here? Why do you want to start, your career with this company or with me specifically, if you're interviewing with a person? Really think that through. And that goes back to what I said earlier about doing research and looking internally, and just saying, is this something I want to do? And if so, why? Because they're going to ask you. So it's important to have that prepared.
And the genuine, being genuine
Yeah.
is such a thing. But
Yeah.
I'm gonna take a real quick break because we've been talking nonstop, and I just want to ask if any of the students have any questions right now, up to now. If they want to ask questions, I've got a whole lot more to ask Lisa, but if anyone's got any questions now.
I've got a question.
Okay.
So
Hi, introduce yourself. What's your name?
Sorry, I'm Casey.
Hi, Casey.
So I know the biggest part with listening is everyone has their own internal hurdles to get past. You mentioned the phone is an easy distraction, but with the police investigations that you've helped on, where clearly the police just weren't listening to the witnesses or whoever, what is it they can't get past? Is it some kind of bias to where, well, I don't like how they look, so they're not a credible witness? Is it, I think they're too close to the situation, so I can't trust anything they say? Why aren't they listening?
Hey, Casey, that's a really good question. So we all have, and you hit a really good point on that, bias. We all have internal biases, right? We have a bias. If I'm walking down the street and, I see somebody with a MAGA hat on, I might have a bias about who that person is, and, how they view me as a Latina, right? Or as a woman. So we all have these biases. And, as a reporter, they say that, reporters are supposed to be objective and, not pick sides, and be very unbiased, right? Which I call bullshit. Sorry for my language. Because there is a right and a wrong, and there is a good and a bad. And, I think in doing investigations, I get to be a victim's advocate. So I get to err a little bit more on the side of, I'm fighting for my victims' rights or social justice, or, if I see wrongdoing, I try to help fix it. And often there's a bad guy in my stories who I confront at the end. So I've made a conscious choice somewhere along the line to feel like, okay, this is the person that's a predator, or this is the person that has hurt these consumers, or is hurting these kids, or has done this crime, or is scamming consumers. So at some point I make a decision that this person, is the person I'm going to focus on, and I'm going to go talk to at the end of the story. But a lot of the reason, Casey, that law enforcement, for example, doesn't listen is because there's a power dynamic, right? So if you're at the top of the power dynamic, you don't necessarily feel like you need to listen to the people on the bottom of the power dynamic. Huge mistake, right? And that goes for anything. If you're an A-list celebrity and you're not listening to the people who are paying, the ticket money to go see you, either a film or in concert, if you're not listening to your fans, then you're making a huge mistake. So there's always this power dynamic. And often as a reporter, you feel like you have the power dynamic because you have the microphone. But if you look at it differently, the person that I'm interviewing is in the power position, because I'm interviewing them because they have something that I want to hear. So it's all about looking at yourself and of course, going back to, why am I here? What's the purpose of why I'm here? What am I trying to get out of this interaction? And in order to get something out of it, I have to listen carefully. And I can't think that I am so arrogant or so powerful that only my concept of what I need to get out of this is the thing that matters. The person that I'm interviewing is going to give me something interesting. They're going to say something that is compelling. I guarantee it. If you've done your research and you're asking the right questions, you're going to get some nugget of truth that's going to be really powerful if you listen. Did that help?
It did. Unfortunately, that made too much sense.
It's a great thing, because you also hear, which is so amazes me at times, is where we talk about listening to gatekeepers, so to speak, at businesses and things. And people feel when they reach a certain level, they don't need to be kind to the receptionist, the assistant, the intern, and all they need to deal with is their peer, and not realizing that that person that they're mistreating or ignoring or not listening to is the one that's really going to A, either maybe do the work, or B, determine whether or not you ever get the time to talk to the person you want to talk to. And it's so important to try and put yourself on every level.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Also, can I make one more point about this?
Of course.
About how everybody, you know, in my opinion, you were talking about the phone earlier. The phone is my friend, and I'm on social media. I'm on all of it. So please follow me. I'm at @Lisa Guerrero on everything. One of the things that I think is so powerful about the phone and social media is that it evens out that playing field. So the power dynamic has really shifted, because you are now able to be a citizen journalist, and anything you post on your platform can go viral very quickly if it's important, if it's newsworthy. So always know that there's not this power dynamic that used to be. That's changed. That, you know, anybody has the opportunity to have a lot of followers and to have a platform and to have a very, you know, powerful voice if you're really encourage people to look at them, even if you're not going into journalism. And presumably a lot of you guys are you know, going to go into business of some kind, but look around you and really consider yourself a citizen journalist, because it changes the power of how you feel about yourself. It gives you that self-assurance to know, you know, my voice matters and your voice does matter. Again, going back to my earlier part of the conversation about, do you want to work for this company? And if you do, understand that you're gifting them yourself, and that is a huge gift. And it's not just about them giving you a job. It's about you deciding that you're going to work there. Different mindset.
That's great. Before I go back to my questions, any other questions you guys want to ask? All righty. Well.
Oh, sorry, I have a
Oh,
question.
go ahead. Yeah.
Just to go back from, hi, I'm Olivia, sorry.
Hi, Olivia.
Hello, just to go back from.
I love your glasses.
Thank you.
Those are great. So
Thank
cute.
you. Just to go back to when like you were saying, like when you're like listening to someone, you have to like be empathetic with them. Is there ever like a point where like you get like too emotional, or like because it can take a toll on you, like if you are constantly like in an emotionally you get drained. So is there ever a time like where you have to like kind of stop yourself from like certain things to like get to a point where like you're getting exhausted yourself?
That's a really good question, Olivia. Yes, as an investigative reporter, I talk, you know, half of what I do is talk to victims. Let's say a third on camera. A third of what I do is victim interviews and pre-interviews. So before you go on camera, sometimes I talk to them on the phone or talk to them off camera and really gather the information about what led them here. And typically these people have either been ripped off, they've lost a family member, they've lost a home, they've endured some kind of trauma or tragedy to get them to the point where they're talking to me. And can you imagine the strength it takes to talk to somebody on camera, knowing that your face and your words are going to be broadcast in front of millions of people as they would be on Inside Edition? This is what I think makes me a good reporter, is that I don't fight the emotion of it. I let it wash over me. I've had people tell me these horrible things about sexual abuse, losing, a father, mother to COVID. I can't tell you how many COVID victims I've spoken to this year. I've lost my cameraman and my senior producer to COVID. But that emotion and that vulnerability and that empathy is like a rod of strength in my spine. Because once I let it wash over me, I hold it, I keep it, and I think about using my voice to give that platform to that victim, because I have an amazing opportunity to not let that crush me or let it crush them, but to let other people know about this, about whether it's a scam or whether it's a crime or there's a predator out there, whatever it is. I can only be really good at my job if I empathize and I connect with that victim. And I take that pain or that fury and then I channel it. Boom, 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 boom. Who's the bad guy? And then I take all my resources and all my strength and I am going to go towards that person and I'm going to try, the issue, whatever the issue is, or the person. And that's why I'm good at confrontation. People are like, oh, she's so good at confrontations. It's not the confrontation that I'm good at. It's the empathy for the victim that I'm good at. When I confronted recently another televangelist about using PPP money to buy a private jet, I empathized with the small businesses that didn't get that PPP money, the restaurants in our community. Some of our parents own small businesses that didn't get that PPP money. In a limited supply of money, this televangelist got $4 million. He was already a multimillionaire. And then he bought a private jet 2 weeks later with it. That's money that didn't go to somebody else to sustain their business and feed their children. So that's where I get, that ability to, at the end of the day, confront that person. But it is because, Olivia, I empathize with victims and I don't fight it. I let it wash over me. I cry in interviews sometimes along with my victims. We don't usually show that. Once in a while they'll air that bit, but typically they'll cut me out and show the victim. But they have aired times when I've been very emotionally touched by somebody's story. But I think any good listener is going to be empathetic in any, it's not just journalism, if you're an educator, if you're a business person, if you're not empathizing with people that are in pain or in need, then ultimately you're not going to be good at your job.
And to kind of piggyback on that, following you and watching you on social media, there are things that are presented to you that don't raise to the level of an investigation on Inside Edition, but that empathy you have, you still share it. You still give voice to those that may not be able to have a voice, and it's so powerful to read about things that are happening that, like I said, may not make it to this warrants an investigation, but you feel that. And the other thing that I see that is neat, you mentioned earlier about your escape with the mosaic art. The empathy takes a toll on you, and it works, and it's hard, and you need to have that release, and that's part of being a good listener, because you bring in this stuff, and like Olivia asked, does it ever become too much? When it does, you've got to find a way to reach back to your even center. And it's different for each person how you do that.
Right. And it's really important to find out what that is now, though, as you're in school right now and you're getting ready to launch your career. It's really important to think about, you're going to be driven in your career and they're going to ask a lot out of you, many hours and a lot of work, but you've also got to determine what is that outlet that you're going to be able to go to at night or on the weekends, where you're going to be able to escape and not think about work and be able to use your other gifts to do something else. And even if it's giving back, to an organization, a nonprofit, a couple of hours on a weekend, that is really helpful. I find that, through art and music, that just, I can divorce myself of, those issues temporarily and focus on this work and then go back to it with a clean, fresh slate.
That's such good advice. Any other questions right now, or? Well, I'm gonna kind of ask you, as someone who has grown in the industry you've chosen to grow to, you've skipped from modeling to actress. I shouldn't say skip, but transferred your focus from, originally a cheerleader, director of a cheer team, to all these different industries and professions. How do you make that first contact to say, like when you were thinking, I want to get involved with investigative reporting or being the West Coast reporter for Inside Edition? How do you take your desire to take that different step and reach out to people and initiate conversations to say, I'm interested? What goes into that when you're thinking about it? How are you afraid to go to a complete stranger and say, hey, I want you to give me a chance to explain who I am, what I am?
So in my career, as you mentioned, it's been crazy. And I don't think that when people say, oh, what did you do to become an investigative reporter? I want to do that. You can never emulate exactly what I did, because what I did was not a planned journey. The path of my career has been like this, not straight, not linear, but a winding road. And, again, I started in modeling and acting and sports casting. I was raised by a single dad who was a sports fan, was very comfortable on camera. So I excelled at that, and I knew my sports, so that helped, but I didn't go to broadcasting school. I was also an actor. My dad put me in junior theater acting when I was 8 years old after losing my mother, as a form of grief therapy. So I learned the skill set of acting very early, and how to use my emotion and how to channel that on camera. So I had a very unique skill set based on a very complex kind of upbringing that was a difficult upbringing, but also with a gifted dad that helped me figure out what to do with that grief and what to do with that loss. And so that led to acting, which, then led to broadcasting. I will say that when I was a West Coast correspondent for Inside Edition, I had never done investigative reporting. There was an investigative reporter who had been here for a couple of decades by the name of Matt Mahar, and he was leaving, he was retiring, and they were interviewing other investigative reporters from around the country, men, to do that job. So I went to my executive producer and I said, Charles, I want to do investigative reporting. And I feel like this is something that I want to do. I think I would be good at this. And, I had no business really asking. I had never done investigative reporting before. And he said, this is a very dangerous job. It's grueling. You'll be traveling all over the country, working nights, weekends, long hours. You'll be in dangerous situations. Matt has had a gun pulled on him, bats, he's been hit, he's been pushed down, he's had death threats. It's a very difficult job. I wouldn't recommend it for a woman, the way that we do investigations. And of course, that made me just want to do it more. So I asked him something very specific. I said, just give me one assignment. Just let me try one assignment with the investigative unit, kind of like an audition. If it's terrible, you don't have to air it, but can I just try one? And so I kind of negotiated myself into being given that shot. And when he was saying to me, it's dangerous, it's da 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 da, I had an answer. I said, well, I used to be the only woman in the locker room when I covered sports for years and years. I'm used to, having people shove and push me around. I'm used to being in environments where it's not comfortable. I'm a brave person. I think I could be good at this. I don't have kids and I'm not married, so I can go around the country. I'm not, going to be tied to, having to be in a 9-to-5 job. I can do anything. I can go anywhere. So I had all of these answers for him. And then I negotiated the one opportunity, and that one opportunity ended up winning a headliner award. So that was it. He had no choice. He had to hire me at that point. So that was 2010. And so for the last 11 years, I've been doing this part of the job, investigative reporting. But my point is, try to negotiate yourself into it. Come prepared. If you're asking for a job or you're asking for something kind of outside your comfort zone or what you think that other people might think that you're good at, first of all, be prepared with what you want to do. And also just understand that you may have to talk them into it, right? Talk them into letting you have this opportunity. Negotiate, give me one chance, give me one assignment, hire me for 3 months, I'll do something for 2 weeks, just as an audition kind of a thing, and be prepared to do that and then knock it out of the park.
And it's such a neat thing you said, because presenting yourself to someone who may not think you're the right candidate or the right person for something, be it interviews, be it business dealings in any way. So many times we have experiences and history that may not fit in their funnel of what they think they need in order to say use it. But you spoke about being in a locker room and the only female reporter in a baseball locker room or football locker room. I mean, there's things that are learned in that, and each of us in our own world have experiences that may not fit under what the job says you need as an experience, but real life says you gained as an experience. And being able to share that is just such a huge benefit. And I'm gonna kind of transfer from like job type things like to mentors. And I'm guessing you probably had some people reach out and say, can I chew your ear on this, and how do I be a better person? How do I better situate myself just as in a mentor mentee type world? What would you say to someone who wants to reach out to a vice president of a company, a complete stranger other than maybe knowing them on social media? How do you take that first step and say, I really admire what you do, and I'd love to offer this and maybe get this in return?
First of all, understand and respect the fact that a lot of those people are extremely busy and they've got a lot on their plate and they don't have a lot of time. So I would first go to, if it's that person's company, first go to human resources and see if they have a mentorship program. And a lot of them do. And start there. Start with a structure in place for mentoring. I know that a lot of the organizations that journalists are a part of, IRE, which is Investigative Reporters and Editors, or the Hispanic Broadcast Journalist Organization, a lot of them have programs for mentoring. So start with those programs that are already in place, because they're already structured to help you. They're looking for young people to connect with professional people that have the time and the resources to help you. So don't be discouraged if the person that you think you want to work with can't help you because they've got 3 kids and they're on the road all the time and they just can't give you what you are going to need. Don't be discouraged. Understand that there are people that can mentor you and want to mentor you. But the first thing I would do if you're going to reach out to somebody, especially on social media, is make sure they know who you are and what your background is. So, if it's from, I've had young journalists come to me, can you help me? Can you give me advice? And a lot of them, the smart ones, will send me their reels the video that they already have. And usually, hopefully they're only a minute or a couple minutes. So I can just quickly see and give them some quick advice. Unfortunately, I can't mentor all the people that come to me, the young journalists, but I try to do 2 a year. And then I also give back to different organizations like IRE that have a mentorship program. But the best thing is make sure they know who you are, have a bio or bullet points about what you've done and what you're trying to achieve, where you want to go. Because if you're going to contact the vice president of a company and see if they can give you some, and that's the way I'd probably broach it too, is some advice, because mentorship also sounds like an ongoing commitment. And I think advice is the first step in. Have them give you advice. Hopefully you guys connect, and then you can go to more of a more permanent mentorship relationship. Does that make sense?
No, and it does. And it's always interests me because initiating conversations and communications, it's such a tough thing sometimes. And I've been doing this for over 30 years, trying to talk to people from sales to teaching to whatnot. And every semester when I think about, I'd like to have a couple guest speakers, I get like a lump in my stomach thinking, I'm going to direct message Lisa Guerrero and say, hey, do you have time? And we've built a relationship of sort where I should feel comfortable, but there's these times where depending on who you're talking to, you're hesitant, like, because you expect the worst answer. And you're like, they're going to be way too busy. Why am I going to trouble them? And you've got to overcome that. And I think the final question I would ask you, how do you, and this goes into your being brave thing, how do you overcome that fear that you're taking someone's time that they don't have time for, or they're most likely going to say no to you, or things like that? How do you build yourself up to ask for the things you should ask for?
Okay, so I've got a really simple exercise that everybody should be doing every single day that will help you be more courageous in anything you do moving forward. You know how people say practice makes perfect. So you can, believe it or not, practice how to be more courageous. And I'll give you a really simple exercise. And I promise you, if you do this every day, you're going to look back in 6 months and go, I am a different person right now. So every single day, I will challenge you to commit a random act of courage. This means that every morning when you wake up, you're going to find some time throughout the day to do one thing out of your comfort zone, a small thing, anything that you typically wouldn't do, that takes you out of your, oh, I'm nervous to say this, I don't want to bother this person, I don't want to make a scene, I don't want to, because normally we are conflict averse. We don't want to confront anybody, we don't want to have conflict, we don't want to rock the boat. A courageous person rocks the boat, sorry to tell you. And in order to be able to ask somebody to do you a favor, you have to have that courage, that inner self-confidence to know that hey, maybe they will, maybe they won't. And if they can't, that's okay. I'm not going to take it personally, but that's a hard thing to get to. So if you commit a random act of courage every day, you will become a more courageous person. And by this, I mean, if you are somebody, for example, I talk to kids about this. Maybe you're the person that day that at lunch sits next to the loner kid that nobody wants to sit next to, or the kind of geeky kid that nobody talks to. Your random act of courage that day may just be to sit next to somebody at lunch that nobody ever sits next to. Maybe your random act of courage that day is when you're at 7-Eleven and you see somebody being marginalized because they're speaking Spanish and the cashier or somebody else is giving them a hard time because there are a bunch of Karens out there. Maybe you're the anti-Karen that day. Maybe you're the person saying, I'm sorry, not on my watch. Are you going to talk to that person like that? That might take a few more, random acts of courage before you build up to that. But believe me, I'm there. Maybe it's just somebody's not wearing their mask at a grocery store and you walk by and say, please put your mask on. That's your random act of courage. And let me tell you, that takes courage. So if you do that every day, though, in small ways or large ways, you're going to be the person that will eventually be brave enough to walk into your boss's office after an appropriate amount of time and say, you know what, I need to talk to you about a raise. It's time. And here's why. I've done this and this and this for the company. And it's time for me to be able to get that bump in salary. And when you're that person, you are a courageous person, but you didn't just get there overnight. You got there because you practiced being brave. So Brent, you practiced a random act of courage by reaching out to me to ask if I would do this.
Yeah.
And I said, yes, of course I wanted to do this. And typically people want to help other people. Typically people want to be of value. And sometimes it's a compliment when somebody's asked to be of value. So if you think about it like that, then it helps you kind of overcome any qualms you might have about reaching out to somebody. Does that help? I want you all to just commit a random act of bravery every day. I think somebody, Oprah or somebody said, commit a random act of kindness. Kindness is great, but it's easy. Courage is hard, much harder.
That's so true. And my goodness, I thank you so much for the time. Is there anything, I kind of gave you an outline of stuff we want to go over, and I think I hit almost all of it. Is there anything else you want to share with the students before I let them one final shot to ask questions?
I think we've hit everything, but you guys, if you want to reach out to me on social media, please do. And again, use social media as a platform to reach out to the people in business or those mentors that you might have. Start with social media, because a lot of people pay close attention to who's following them, especially people in business that might not have thousands of people following them, but a couple of hundred. Make sure you're following them, and make sure you care about, giving them feedback on things, liking or commenting on things. That really affects how people think of you, right? So use social media, not just LinkedIn, but Twitter, to really reach out to people.
Yeah. It nothing to do with the topic in this class, but I'll just ask your opinion real quick. Be the same person in person that you are on social media. Don't create different profiles or what you think you're supposed to be if you can't live up to that as a person in person.
Yeah, use your real name.
Yeah.
And use your real likeness, and be a real person on social media. Don't be an Abby. Don't have some funny, crazy handle. Be yourself.
Yeah.
Be yourself.
It
Good
helps a
advice.
lot. Yeah. And all right, any last questions for Lisa before we let her go today? Okay. Give everyone a second to see if they can push on mute. Still getting used to the Zoom thing, but thank you so much for coming in, and I truly appreciate your time today. And hopefully everybody learned a little something. So thank you, and I have a feeling I'm sure I'll see you out in the online world sometime real soon.
Great. Sounds good. Thanks, Brent. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you for your time.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
You're welcome. Thank you.
So